Hello ladies and gentlemen, Mike here at Game From Scratch, and we are looking today at Lumberyard. Lumberyard is Amazon's game engine based off of CryEngine, completely separate entities now, but they have a common root. Back when Amazon gave them a huge wad of cash back about the 3.3 era of CryEngine, since then Amazon have been developing their own engine and Crytek have been developing their own version of CryEngine. They are different things at this point in time, they just share a common code base from a few years back. Now the nice thing about Lumberyard is it's completely free to use as long as you provide your own networking or you use Amazon services for doing your online services. So what exactly is in Lumberyard Beta 1.19? Well, the crux of it is there's 150 improvements here, but we're going to focus on the two biggies, and I'm going to demonstrate them in just a second, and then we'll jump back and take a look at the full list of the 150 new things. But the two big things that they are advertising here are new dynamic vegetation systems and a major update to script canvas. So we're going to just quickly demo both of those things, and then we'll jump back over to the release notes. So here we are in Lumberyard. I'm not going to do this as a tutorial. Speaking of which, I'm kind of getting more and more to the point where I'm thinking I might do a Lumberyard tutorial, just like an onboarding one. So here's how you can get up, started, have something moving around on screen, and so on. Because the beginner experience for Lumberyard stinks. But let me know what you guys think, comments down below. All right, so anyways, here we are. We've got the starter game open. The nice thing about the starter game is it has all of the gems configured. Now, gems are extensions to Lumberyard game engine, and one of those extensions is the new vegetation system. So if you just open up the starter game, you can go ahead and just create a new level within it, and we can start from there. So we'll call this YouTube demo 90210, because I don't know how many of these I've done at this point in time. I'm pretty good with the defaults. We'll leave the textures pretty much the same. And here we are. That's something about source code on this particular machine. I don't know why it thinks I have Perforce installed, but oh well. So here we are in our level. We've got a giant terrain with not much going on in it. And the first thing I'm going to do, this isn't really part of it, but we're going to be interacting with the terrain anyway. So we're going to go ahead and make the terrain slightly more interesting. So we're going to open up the terrain editor right here. And this is basically a height map painter you can draw from the top. But what instead we're going to do is we're going to say, first off, set the max terrain height, because this default value makes for some really stupid terrain. So we'll set that to 50, and then we'll come in here and just do a generate terrain, various different settings. Yeah, I'm fine with that. And it'll create terrain that looks like that. All right, so that'll work. And done. Exit out of there, and then you'll see we now have terrain. And we could go back in here, like there are other things we can work with. And the way this used to work is you would then come in with your terrain tool, and you've got your various different options here. So for example, if we wanted to paste vegetation around the level, we can manually paint it on here. And this is where you can also do things like we could paint the ground. So if we come in here, let's say give this like a brownish color. Okay, and we'll make that brush really big. You know, so you can come in and you can paint your world like so. And this is kind of, this vegetation painting anyways, this part right here is what the new vegetation system does for us. So I'm going to do, we'll zoom in closer to the world, and now we're going to go ahead and create a vegetation system. So again, you need to have the gem installed. Just come on up here, create an entity, and we'll call this Vegiland. All right, so once that's there, this is not the most intuitive thing you've ever seen, but there's a couple of steps involved. First thing you need to add, so it's using an entity component system here. So we're adding a component to our entity of Vegiland. Our component is under the vegetation section, and you've got a vegetation layer spawner. So basically, this is what gives us veg in the world. So this will populate the world with vegetation. We've got added component requirements. So you see here, first we have a shape need there. And I'm just going to expand this out a bit. And we'll make this guy say 50 by 50 by 50 so I can actually see it. There we go. So there is the box that is controlling the boundaries of our spawner. And then next up, we need to create either an asset list or an asset list combiner. We're going to do an asset list. This is basically the list of entities that will spawn within your spawner. So this is where you can pick your vegetation. So here we go. We're going to zoom in on our world here so we can see this in action. So there is the boundings of our vegetation layer spawner, and we can start adding things to the world. So for example, if we wanted to have a grass, we come in here, mesh assets. The nice thing is the default level has a number of things in it. So we're just going to go down here. We're going to locate natural, vegetation, and grass. So let's do grass plain group. All right, so there we go. So now we have grass in our world. You see it spawned it all nicely. Now, there's not a lot of randomness or thought to it, and we're going to look at that in just a second. So now I'm going to go ahead and add another thing into the mix. So we've got grass so far. We're going to click here. We're going to add, so we now have 2 elements. We're going to go to the second one here, and let's add in lilies. Yeah, some lilies. So lily pads. So there, we now have lily pads in our world, and the weighting should control it. Now you're seeing, okay, well, we got 100% going on here. What do we do to control that? Well, now we're going to add a child node to our veggie. So come here and create a child entity. Now this is a gradient. I'll call it grady. And we're just going to come over here. I'm going to create a new, and we want to create a fast noise gradient. You can use whatever gradient you want. But here, so this is like a color texture that is going to be used for the spawner, for figuring out where things should be located. All right, so there we go. We got a gradient now. It has a required component, which is a gradient transform modifier, like so. And it has a required component. And I'm just going to go ahead and pick for it wants a shape. And I will pick this box as the shape. There you go. So we now have our gradient in there. I'll go back to grady here. Oops, that was wrong. I mixed. All right, select that guy. Okay, so now you can actually go ahead and preview the gradient that is being generated, like so. And you can just kind of play around with it, so you can do a randomized seed until you get a result you want. We'll come back here in a second. But now that we have that gradient available, let's go on back over to here. And we're going to add another component here. And it's under the vegetation section again. And it is the asset weight selector. And this is going to determine how things are allocated around our vegetation spawner. So with the asset weight selector here, we can pick a gradient for it. So we're going to pick the gradient. We'll click here, and we will select grady. Like so. And that is going to control how things spawn and distribute within our world based off of that gradient map. So now you see we got a nice randomness going. We got a combination of grass and lily pads. Let's go ahead and add one more thing of some interest here. So we're just going to go back here. So we'll go from 2 elements to 3 elements, and you can just kind of keep doing this till the dogs come home. But we're going to come here and go, let's throw in a red oak tree. There we go. So now we have oak trees in our world. Now you find that those oak trees might be dominating things slightly. There might be a little bit too many of them. Then what you can do is come in here for the oak tree, and we just lower its weight a bit, so that it's less likely to be populated. And there you see less oaks in the world. And that's kind of the gist of what you're doing. At any time, we can go back to that gradient that's generated over here, and we could change out, so instead of Perlin fractal, we could go to cellular gradient. This is going to create a very different result, and you're going to get a very, very different result over here. Let's go back to Perlin fractal, though. So you can just kind of tweak around with the numbers, the frequencies, and so on. Changes out the way the gradients work, kind of changes the density, and then you get kind of a very different distribution in your world. But that is essentially, well, at least the basics. Let me put that back to 0. It works better there. Why am I getting nothing now? Oh, I turned off completely. All right. All right. So there is our mix of grass, our excessive number of lily pads, which I'm gonna turn the lily pads down slightly too. So where'd my lily pads go? Right here. Now, one of those things that you might think about a lily pad is you may only want a lily pad to interact with, say, water or something to that effect. Well, you've got that ability. You'll notice here under the components, there are other things here like blockers. So you can define an area as being a road or a river, and have only certain things go into certain areas. There's a lot more to how you can put things in here. You've also got control over how things are done based off altitude and slope, and so on, way beyond what I'm going to cover here. We're just going to show you the basics of this guy right now. Now, the cool thing is, what I can do is I can grab this guy. So let's go up here, and we'll switch over here to move mode, and we can move this guy in the world. And I believe there's a hill just over there. So let's start climbing the hill like that, and you will notice our vegetation climbs the hill, and that is pretty cool. So, and you can also, at any time, you can change the shape of that bounding control, and your vegetation spreads accordingly. So you can obviously have multiple vegetation spawners with different vegetation for different regions, but that is the marquee new feature. Again, we are only scratching the surface, and unfortunately some of the documentation for some of these other more advanced features is slightly lacking, so hopefully we'll get a bit more details in time. But I hope you can see how you can utilize this, bring a number of different things together, and have it basically procedurally or algorithmically disperse your things instead of having to paint everything by hand. So that is the one major new feature. Now the next new feature, I'm just going to go ahead and create an entity to showcase this. So demo ent, and this is going to be a mesh. All right, so just a mesh. Here we go, and let's scale that guy up. So let's make that guy 10 times bigger than it is. And apply a mesh to it. So once again, I'm just going to grab something from the pack. I think it's man-made that I want. There's a barrel icon in here that works pretty well. Props, barrel. All right, so we'll grab this guy. All right, so we just created a giant barrel in the sky, like so. Now I'm going to showcase some of the new changes to script canvas. Now, script canvas is actually a pretty cool thing. So we're going to come up here. We're going to go ahead and go Tools, Script Canvas. Dun, dun, dun. And I want you undocked so we can all play along. All right, here we go. This is Script Canvas. This is their visual scripting system that's been kind of under development the entire time. This is sort of their future as opposed to, say, C# programming. You would use Script Canvas to do a lot of your programming. It's very similar to Blueprints if you've ever used Unreal Engine. And it's come quite a ways, actually, for the most part. So let's going to go ahead and do... we're going to show you some new functionality here. First off, now what you can do, instead of bringing in here and selecting the items that you want, you can actually shift right-click now. Shift right-click. Oh, I got to create a new script. Okay, so once you've done that, shift right-click, and then it brings up kind of like a parallel or inline version of this. And what you can do is look for your thing. So I'm doing on tick, but you'll notice it automatically kind of expands out. So you can just kind of keep going. So now I'm going to do a couple of print statements. So you see it's chaining it. So I do 2 prints like that. And then let's actually do something. So rotate. Yeah, we'll rotate around the y-axis or the x-axis. All right, good. So there we go. So what it now allows you to do is chain those things together. So if you know you're going to be creating a sequence, you can have it automatically connect the pins between them as it goes, and you can just kind of keep going. Definitely speeds up the way things work. So here we got, this will call every frame on tick. You can go ahead, print your debug message here. So, hello, why are you not working? All right, let's try it again. Hello, cruel world. And then every tick that's going to be done. And then here's something so you can actually see it. So let's do an X rotation of 0.01 degrees per tick. The source is ourself, so that's whatever this is applied to. And we'll just go ahead and we'll save that, and we'll call it rotate-o-matic script. All right, there we go. So we now have our script in the world. I'm going to bring this guy off screen. One of the nice things is Lumberyard is really set up for a multi-modular setup. It works really poorly without it, but it works really well with it. All right, so like anything else, that's just a component. So we'll come up here to you're stealing focus just after I finish the complement. All right, I'll shut that down, see if that's causing my issues. All right, select my entity. Why are you bugging out? All right, joy. All right, I'll be right back. All right, no idea why that glitched out there, the joy of doing live demos, but now I'm going to go ahead, add component, and if you look for script, you will find there is a script canvas option. Go ahead, select that, and then just pick our newly created rotate-o-matic script, like so. All right, and that should work. So we run our code. And nothing. It might be my value is too low. 1 second, so we'll just select that guy again. We'll open directly in the editor. I will. This is off screen, so here I'll bring this in docket this time. Like this. Come on. And let's just make that 0.5 instead. Make sure to save that. Come back over here. And run. There you go. Okay, why is 0.01 so slow, but 0.005 is like outrageously fast? Anyways, hit escape, exit out. I'm going to go back to 0.1. We'll save that, and then we will run. All right, I am really not liking you right now. All right, 0.01 should be quite slow. Did it save? I don't know if I saved it there. There we go. One thing, by the way, if you are on the Lumberyard team, please have some kind of you have unsaved changes prompt or automatically save on run option or something, because the number of bugs or gotchas I run into because I didn't save over here with my changes, and it's kind of a separate program in Lumberyard land. That is frustrating. So anyways, you can see this is the new functionality available. So you can chain things together. On top of that, let me just exit out of there. We'll undock this guy so you can see it a little bit bigger. There's another really cool option that you can do now is I can do something like grab these two right here, right click, and we can now group. And we'll call this the commenting group. And then what that allows you to do is collapse things down and just have the comments going on. And it allows you to create more complex systems that you can then collapse down into very easily understood code. Basically, makes your scripts a little bit more clean as a result of that new change. So those are the major new changes. The two new features. We got script canvas improvements, and we've got the new vegetation system we saw in action right there. Now, again, it is gem-based, so if you want to add it in, you have to go into the project configurator, like so, and on your selected project, you go to Enable Gems, and make sure that Veg is enabled. So have that guy checked right there, and on top of that, the gradient is also a preview function. Make sure that it is enabled as well. Now, you'll find that these are all implemented in the starter game, so you don't need to do any of that out of the box. But if you're creating your own new game from scratch, pun not intended, you'll have to use you'll have to configure them into your project at some point in time. So that's that. Now, more specifically, let's get into the release notes of Lumberyard Beta 1.119. Again, you see the dynamic vegetation was added. You see if you spend some more time with it, add some lighting to your scene, add some more color and textures and so on, you can make it look much better than I did, but we essentially saw the gist of what it's about. You can create complex biomes in one nested slice to apply changes across an entire area of the world. Quickly iterate your vegetation to preview how the changes look. You can set up customization so you can only grow in specific surfaces, such as your lily pads could only grow on the water and not on the road, for example. And then you got to use the gems. Again, there's a gradient there. We saw that in action. Creating a chain of linked nodes, we also saw that in action. Grouping, we saw that in action. They've also, under the script canvas, added container support, which is pretty big. So now you've got arrays and map support. You can use arrays to provide a dynamic continuous area of memory that can hold storage of a given type. You know what an array is, I'm assuming. There's a node alignment tool, script events. Script events are a robust data-driven mechanism for creating cross-script events. You can create events to use in Lua and Script Canvas. You can send events from one script to another. So basically, it's like passing messages between different scripts, including Lua scripts if you so wish. Script Canvas Debugger now has a runtime debugger, which is definitely nice. So working with Script Canvas is a much more feasible option now with array containers and maps, debugging, grouping, and better creation tools is definitely an improvement there. We got the new Viewport interaction mode. Now, you actually have to turn this on, and you're going to find that the way you deal with this is all about selecting, moving, transforming, all that stuff of your entities in the world. This is beta, so it's not quite ready yet, but you can turn it on in preferences. It's not just directly under preferences. It's under edit, general preferences, or editor preferences, something to that effect. I should have demoed that before we shut it down. But so interact with entities using manipulators instead of gizmos. Add support for new translation and rotation manipulators. Use a single aggregate manipulator to edit multiple entities at once. Simplify your selection when switching between parent or world space. Moves the manipulator independent of your selection. Add support for ditto operations for working with manipulators and entities. Enables you to quickly switch between translation and rotation manipulation. So basically, the select, translation, and rotation / tools are better. Unfortunately, there are a few limits. Does not currently support vertex snapping. The terrain editor and track view editor do not work with it. Legacy entities, such as terrain and vegetation from using the legacy system, do not work with it. Partial support for material editor. So I don't think I would recommend turning it on yet, but I did turn it on, and I did find general editing tasks in Lumberyard to be more pleasant. So I would expect at some point in the future this will be the way you select things. And it's nice to see those improvements coming along. But again, you have to turn that on if you wish. And when you do turn it on, it does require a reboot of Lumberyard, not of your computer. Editing components in the viewport. In the entity inspector, you can now choose the edit button for selected components. All the components attached to the entity can't be edited. This feature prevents you from accidentally editing other components attached to the entity and makes it easier to edit your components freely in the viewport. You can use the following feature to do, you can use this feature to do the following: enter a sandbox to edit only selected component properties. Customize shortcuts for your components, use manipulators to make editing visual data more intuitive, and build your own component mode for other components. So that is the major features of this new release. So we've got a lot of improvements on the vegetation side. Script Canvas got a lot of love this release, and then kind of just general across the board quality of life improvements, at least in various states of readiness anyways. So yeah, that is basically I gotta stop doing that. It's Lumberyard 1.19. Now Lumberyard actually, or Amazon Game Studios, kind of got a bit of flack this week. It hasn't been a great news week for them. I started to fear a bit for Lumberyard's future, just because there was an announcement out that Amazon Game Studios just laid off dozens of people, and then some of the developers that were laid off supposedly blamed having to use the Lumberyard game engine as why they weren't successful with their games. Now, that's all kind of hearsay, but it did come up. So it was nice to see this release come out, because it had been a while. I wasn't sure what was going on. And this is definitely one of those releases that does make Lumberyard a bit more accessible, more capable, more powerful. It's not just them implementing more cloud services, which is what a lot of these releases often feel like. It's like, oh, now you can use Twitch this, or like, yeah, this is actual real new functionality for the game engine, and this is the kind of stuff they needed to focus on before. So hopefully we start seeing faster iterations and more of this developer-focused stuff instead of, tie-ins to their own ecosystem. And this kind of releases will definitely make Lumberyard more appealing, which is one of the big problems it's got right now. Why would you choose this over Unity or Unreal at this point in time, or Godot? And a lot of it kind of boils down to like that free thing. That's huge for sure, but is it worth the rest of it? And that's hard to see. But when you start adding like real concrete new features like this dynamic veg system, and you start competing on the technical merits, that argument gets a bit harder. And also, Script Canvas is actually pretty usable, and I know a lot of people despise visual scripting languages, but it works. And I actually find it more pleasant to work with than their Lua scripting. So anyways, that's it. That is Lumberyard 1.19. Let me know what you think. Also, let me know if you'd like an onboarding tutorial. Basically, just like, here's how you get up and going in a game, create some terrain, add some physics, move a character around, handle input, play some sound. If that sounds interesting to you, let me know. I'm kind of getting closer to actually doing that tutorial. But if there's no interest in it, obviously I won't do it. Okay, that's it. Talk to you all later. Goodbye. Well, that's the wrong button.